Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special Jam with Humans presentation. Yes, you are here in order to listen and witness Will Seaward's ghost stories. Spooky ghost stories, in fact. Well, you have waited long enough, so please, ladies and gentlemen, get on your feet and give a big, large round of applause to the man of the hour, Mr. Will Seaward! Hello, everybody! Hooray! Yes, welcome to Will Seward's Spooky Ghost Stories with me, Will Seward. Oh yes, you probably recognize me from my curly mustache and my naturally curly hair and my impeccable sense of fashion. Panthers! Now then, I understand you want me to read from this book. Oh, but you poor things, you don't understand. Don't you see what this book is? It just says danger. Are you sure you want me to read from this book? Let me just read in the comments. You do? Oh no! Oh no, this is terrible. Well, let's just see what it brings us. Okay, let's start. Let's start from the middle. And, oh, that's strange. Last time I opened this book, there was no weird luminous speck in the center. Oh, let me just approach my face to it, just to inspect it a little bit further.
That man was an imposter. It is I, Will Seaward. Ha ha ha! Yes, the Ghost Stories books react to imposters by eating them. I have the real one here. Look, it's from another dimension. It says, oh no, you've switched the oh, I wrote it backwards. This is wonderful, and you switched the image round so it's the right way round. You're a genius. Anyway, yes, hello everyone, and welcome to Will Seward's spooky 8 p.m. UK time, 9 p.m. Amsterdam time ghost stories. Oh, the terror. Oh, the fear. Doubtless you're here to hear some spooky tales, but I wouldn't. If I were you, I'd run away from whichever screen you're watching right now. Go! Run! Flee! Fly! Run! Run away! Go! Go from here! Leave this place! Go! Run! No? Staying, eh? Well, I warn you. It's gonna be scary. And when I say scary, I mean very scary. Just look at this book. Danger is an inappropriate name for a book. How many copies did they think they'd sell? This is clearly by somebody with no sense for marketing. Terrifying. Terrifying beyond words. By the way, everyone, I should say that I'm joined tonight by the magnificent Jam with Humans Orchestra, who'll be playing along with the tales. Wave at them, everybody. Wave at them. That's right. Very good. They can't see you. What are you doing? Unless they can. They could be in your house. If they are, good. Very, very talented. Marvelous. Well, time we began, everybody. It's just about time for Ghost Story the First. But before we commence, there is one final ritual to attend. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for screaming practice. I'm afraid, everybody, that over the course of the two tales you're about to hear, you will probably scream quite a lot. Some of you might even evaporate or melt from fear. So just in case, have a scream now. Get your loved ones and relatives good and accustomed to the sound of your guttural fear noises. Give it a go. Try it now. I assume that you just did. Marvelous. Oh, There go the orchestra. Marvelous, excellent. Oh, they're screaming splendidly. Yes, well done, everyone. Well done. Good screams there. All right, everyone. The first of our tales tonight concerns a terrifying witch. It's time to go on a journey. Come with me, everybody. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Across the night sky and past the spiky mountains of terror, through the pumpkin groves and the stinking lake where dwell the green things, into the proddy wood and the grabby wood, over the howling stile, up the screaming path, and along the trackway that goes, oh no, oh no, oh no, finally into the grove that looks like the sensation of being pinched, then left is a slanty, crooked, wicked cottage. Here, the air is filled with magics and gloom. Here, the grass will try to kill you. Here, lanterns explode and torches run away. If you mention this place to the moon will tell you to fuck off. Here dwells old Mrs. Cauldron. The path is lined with shrunken heads doing faces and covered in what looks like gravel, but is actually more shrunken heads, much smaller shrunken heads. These ones doing faces as befits their smallness. The roof is thatched with that stuff you pull apart to make cobwebs at Halloween. What is that stuff? It's actually quite a serious question, everyone. What is that stuff? On the back of quite a lot of the packets, it just says cobweb. Nobody knows. The walls of the cottage are covered with things to lure the foolish and naive, such as leaflets about how great Brexit will be. Worst of all, every angle in this wretched cottage is a right angle. Because during the building phase, everything was measured with a spirit level. Mrs. Cauldron wasn't married. Her name was a nickname derived from the fact that when she made potions, she had a habit of cack-handedly spilling things on the floor. She misses the cauldron, you see. Mrs. Cauldron. She misses. It's a very clever piece of wordplay by whoever invented that nickname. And, she was frightening. Instead of teeth, Mrs. Cauldron had IOUs for chewing. Instead of a skeleton, she had Skeletor from He-Man. Her nose rotated constantly from all the magic she was doing with it. Her face wasn't a face, but an entire cake of spooky green makeup carved into a vague face shape with a rusty chainsaw. Like all self-respecting witches, Mrs. Cauldron was wearing a bin liner. Her pockets were full of the toes of innocent pianists. And at the end of each of her fingers was a taxidermy child. It was twilight. The worst time of day, full of whining vampires and one-dimensional teenagers. Mrs. Cauldron was out in her garden, pulling arcane herbs. She grew all sorts of things in her garden, did old Mrs. Cauldron. There was a deadly nightshade and a deadly lampshade, which is like a deadly nightshade, but deadly only to undiffused light. There was a rose that smelled of dread, and a lily that smelled of exams, and a breadfruit that smelled of blood, and another breadfruit that smelled of the sight of blood. 1,000 times more frightening. There was a Venus flytrap full of juicy flies, and a fly Venus trap full of juicy Venuses. Also, there were a corpse flower, a bleeding tooth fungus, and a brain cactus. All of which, distressingly, are real plants. Suddenly, there came a noise, a screaming on the screaming path. Some prey was approaching the cottage. Mrs. Cauldron looked up. The prey didn't look up to much. He was a small, weedy, tweedy man. He was angular and bespectacled, and he was covered in the sort of dust that comes from going to old books. That would make eating him unpleasant, but these herbs had to go on something. But as he tripped over the skulls in the pond of skulls, which I didn't mention, but which was there, he cried out, "Stop! Don't eat me! I need to talk to a ghost." "A ghost?" said old Mrs. Cauldron. "What kind of ghost?" "Any kind of ghost," said the prey. "You see, I'm a dusty academic, and I'm doing a PhD in ghosts, and I need to talk to a ghost and make careful field notes." This was intriguing. Mrs. Cauldron was very suspicious of visitors, and had been ever since a van full of sadistic children with a sentient dog had turned up and tried to take off her face. But this was very interesting indeed. She said. Communicating with the dead, you say, dearie. Dangerous business, that. Very dangerous indeed, and very spooky. You might get someone objectionable, like Biggie or Tupac. "Nonsense," said the dusty academic. "Everyone knows that neither of those two people are dead." "Are you really Mrs. Cauldron? The Mrs. Cauldron, the witch I've heard so much about? The witch who turned all the bankers molten? The witch who transformed an entire family into one wise grape? The witch who sacked Nassau port without firing a shot, and who disappeared from under the eyes of 7 members of the East India Company? Besides, I can pay. Mrs. Cauldron didn't reply. She chewed carefully on an innocent villager and simply went, "Ugh!" said the dusty academic. "Is that an embalmed child? For the love of all that's good, please stop making it dance like that." And so, in they went. But let us pause now for a moment and take a look around the inside of Mrs. Cauldron's cottage. Sure, it's smelly in here. Every surface is caked in scary dirt because Mrs. Cauldron uses her broomstick for flying and thus is forced to clean her house with an aeroplane. A sticky mist floats in the air, and jars of nondescript materials line the walls. "Would you like coffee?" said Mrs. Cauldron, throwing loads of milk and coffee beans onto the floor. See, she missed the cauldron. She keeps missing the cauldron. Mrs. Cauldron is her. It's a very clever. Anyway, on we go. "No, thank you," said the academic, and down they sat. Mrs. Cauldron sat in a chair made of the stakes that successive villagers had tried to burn her on, fused together like the iron throne. She took a flickering sip of molten banker. Between them was her seance table. Now, between ourselves, Mrs. Cauldron was rather afraid of what was about to take place because, secretly, her communicating with the dead equipment was pretty rubbish. Instead of a crystal ball, she had a crystal tetrahedron, which told her about forthcoming mid-range fashion trends, and a crystal hexagonal prism, which informed her what was going on in Denmark. Instead of a Ouija board, she had a Luigi board, which is just an Italian plumber lying down. Particularly unspooky, and what was worse, he was usually only able to conjure ghosts from the early noughties Nintendo GameCube game Luigi's Mansion, and they themselves were quite the opposite of scary. Still, old Mrs. Cauldron had distinct doubts about the abilities of this particular dusty academic to withstand the sight of a particularly scary ghost. Perhaps an unscary one was indeed the way to go. "Let's go," said the Luigi board, and they held on to their butts. All of a sudden, the room began to spin. Strange mushrooms, which sometimes inexplicably exploded, whirled and danced around them. All of a sudden, there was a mighty rumbling, and from the cottage's earth and bone floor rose a giant, ethereal plumber's pipe. Inside it whirled a neon vortex, and the dusty academic looked inside, entranced, as something began to emerge. Old Mrs. Cauldron looked on, expecting one of the familiar Luigi's Mansion ghosts. Perhaps King Boo, or Uncle Grimly, or Jarvis the Jar Collector. But no, it wasn't King Boo. She looked harder. It definitely wasn't King Boo, nor was it Boo Losses, or Shivers the Butler, or the Floating Whirlinders. She looked in closer. Perhaps it was one of the ghosts from Pac-Man. But no, it wasn't forthright enough, fickle enough to be Inky, or orange enough to be Clyde. And quite honestly, the name of the other Pac-Man ghost escapes me, but it rhymes with Inky, and it wasn't that one either. Perhaps it was one of the ghosts from Gahan Wilson's Ultimate Haunted House, or the ghost pirate LeChuck from The Secret of Monkey Island. Call and response moment, everyone at home. You fight like a dairy farmer. Anyone who got that right, well done. In she looked. This ghost seemed to be too overtly evil to have been conceived in any video game conference room, which presumably are extremely jolly places. It was entirely disconcerting. But what was certain was that this dusty academic was in no way capable of withstanding the sight. He was already past the usual stages of fear, like trembling, and on to other ones which sort of half rhymed with them, like tumbling and gambling. If Mrs. Cauldron was to exact payment from him, the time would have to be... Well, now! Pay me now! She called. Pay you, said the dusty academic in a voice altogether more sonorous and spooky than the one he'd been using before. Pay you, you say? Very well then. And before her eyes, he shook himself clean of the dust to reveal that beneath it, he was semi-transparent. She should have seen. She should have foreseen. She had tarot cards for exactly this purpose. But alas, old Mrs. Cauldron had fallen into idle ways. She now mostly used her tarot cards for playing tarot poker. For those who are interested, it's a brilliant game. You use the cards in your hand and on the table to make the worst and most terrifying prophecy of doom you can for your opponents. And the winner is the one who doesn't die horribly. Old Mrs. Cauldron was a champion. Besides all that, though, old Mrs. Cauldron was also a devoted anarchist. She believed that all prophecy was theft. Mrs. Cauldron could now see that the image emerging from the neon vortex within Luigi's plumber's pipe, which is indeed a sentence I just said out loud in real life, was the mirror image of the dusty academic. The two halves were coming together. At last, they called, "We'll be whole again!" Now, old Mrs. Cauldron was pretty clever. She knew that when the spirit spoke of paying her, he probably meant it in the gangster way, as opposed to the financial transaction way. Luckily, though, old Mrs. Cauldron had seen the new Ghostbusters film, which was current when I wrote this in 2016. She knew that If you throw nuclear energy at a person, that person will just bounce harmlessly around a yard. Whereas, if you throw nuclear energy at a ghost, that ghost will be trapped in a box for some reason. And old Mrs. Cauldron had some enriched uranium in her pocket. Quick as a quick, she lit it, because that's how nuclear works. Aimed and threw. Across the night sky and past the spiky mountains of terror, through the pumpkin groves and the stinking lake where dwell the green things, along the howling path and up the screaming road and over the stile that goes, oh no, oh no, oh no, into the proddy wood and the grabby wood and the grove that looks like the sensation of being pinched. Then left is a gaping hole in the ground, colored nuclear green. Supposedly, it's haunted by the ghost of a witch and an Italian plumber. If you get lost in the woods, you can always ask directions of the very helpful, completely squeaky clean academic, often to be seen wandering around. Just don't let him get behind you. I told you that story would be terrifying! What were you possibly thinking, inducing me to read that out loud? Good heavens! Oh, I don't know. I think I'm in need of some comforting poetry. Yes, poetry. That's what makes me always cheer up when I'm afraid. Lovely, lovely poetry. Why, look, I seem to have a book of poetry right here. Spooky poetry within, it says. Well, we'll ignore the word spooky. That's probably just a typo by whoever hand wrote that. Well, interesting. Now, everyone, leveling with you, you should know that what is to follow is quite the risk. I have not done this in public since the time I last did it in the Edinburgh show that it was in. Essentially, I wrote myself a thing that was impossible to perform. However, this is the Jam Society. The impossible is possible here. And also, it's a poem, so I thought it would be fun to, see what they did with it. Also, the meter's all over the fucking place, so it's going to be fun. All right, good luck, everyone. In we go. It's time for the poem that is the tale of the zombie dinosaur. It was the night and not the day. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. And it was fairly dark. The pointy hills, they swarmed with ghosts. A toaster there would have made spooky toast. An oast house would have stocked spooky oast. Had there been a copy there of A Recherche de Temps Perdus, it would have been written by Spooky Proust. But what was this? No, I've jumped ahead. Sorry, everyone. That's what happens when you don't do a thing for 5 years. One more time. Sorry, everyone. We've lost a lot of spooky ambience. Everyone at home, if you could oblige me by just going, ooh, that would really help me. There we go. Marvelous. We're back in the room. Thank you, Daniel. All right, back we go. And in those hills, an old ghost mine, closed up since years and quarantined, for dark shit happened all the time to those who'd ghost or hue. But what was this? You are right with that. Something here was sure amiss, for entering this dark abyss, though they'd sometimes stop to pet and kiss, were two young lovers. Hark at this! Clarence and Lulu. And flubbledy-doubledy, they were nice, both quite bereft of any vice. Both of them smelled of fresh allspice. They owned a pet reindeer. All they ate was love with rice and sex cocktails with lots of ice. Their life was pink-tinged paradise. What the feck were they doing here? But hold the thing and cook the cook. They've got an incantations book, which they'd recently seen and recently took from a graveyard in Austria. They hadn't opened it as yet. They hadn't understood the threat of this charming old ghost mine, dark as jet. Should they open and read it? Niet. But by torchlight in this oubliette. That's what they were doing now. Yes, by the ghostly mine unvexed, they chose a bit of Latin text and read it out. What happened next? Expurgissimo aliquando et mihi hanc dinosaurus quo edire nobo ex. They called out in the dark. And as through the mine the lovers strode, with spectral light the trackway glowed, and all of a sudden they suddenly slowed, for the pathway before them began to erode. Yes, the pathway before them began to erode, and not due to the actions of ordinary exogenic processes. They did not look, they did not see the ghost door start to run away. No, they did not feel the urge to flee that mine of old ghost lore. But the lovers stopped, for through the gloom they scried a glowy pit of doom, with the scent of a newly opened tomb, which hadn't been there before. And from that pit of death there rose a thing so dire poor Clarence froze. Sulphurous air he spied an ancient monster zombified. Yes, there it was, the lovers eyed, a thing of nightmares that now plied its way through ghost oxide and crystallized ghoul. They tried to hide, but no, they were stuck inside with the thing that they had woke. And amid the ghost crystals and ghoul mildew, a raven fluttered into view. Yes, a raven fluttered into view. Quoth the raven, dinosaur. It's what I constructed the entire poem around. Its teeth were huge. Its scales smelled bad. It gave a hearty roar. In life it had been a herbivorous beast, not any fucking more. Its shape was vast and shambling, its mouth a bloody foam. It moved to the rhythmic meter of an Edgar Allan poem. From nasty flesh-absent patches, its bony gore flanks could be seen. It was missing one eye and the other was dry, but its flesh was all slimy and green. Its fangs were the color of mustard. All it wanted to do was eat brains. Its tail didn't go swish, it went and rattled like 50 billion ghost trains. Fresh from the Cretaceous, One more time. Fresh from the Cretaceous, its life ruminacious, now ugly and foul and contemporary. With bones ostentatious, flesh gelatinaceous, appetite for front lobes most peremptory. Oh, was it a Struthiomimus or an Acranthanthiosaur? It was huge as mighty Dreadnoughtus, but lithe as Dracovenator. Critosaurus could fit in its jawbone, Ochoceratops fit up its nose. Its claws were like velociraptors. At the sight of it, both lovers froze. Oh, bollocks, oh shit, said Lulu. Ah, cunt, said Clarence. And then the zombie saw did another roar, and rushed claws first, and then... But Lulu was athletic too, and Clarence gym membership fit. They descended the mine with the monster behind, and down they went into the pit. You found me, thank goodness, said wizened old Joe. A prospector lost 4 years and years. But instinct kicked in, and the lovers grabbed him and threw him at the beast of their rear. Oh, buggering fuck, the miner cried. And to get away, the miner tried, but the zombie saw the miner eyed, and in a move, part slip, part glide, towards the miner the monster flied. Yes, it could also fly. It crunched him in its mighty jaws, and from its mouth there came both roars and floods of sticky gore, all bubbly like an arrow. And from the body that was dead there spurted blood in a bright, bright red, as a tribute to George A. Romero. Lulu was quite covered in gore, in her hair, in her clothes, in her eyes. And some of that gore was former US Vice President Al Gore, who kept shouting, "Look, look, I told you they existed," to a group of stubborn climate change deniers. Then the zombie saw, with fiendish glee, also ironically ate the DUP, who were in government when I wrote this, and also because this poem's like me, UKIP and Donald Trump. The lovers, in a panicked frenzy, cast around the mine, and themsy noticed that behind of themsy, having been there many years, was vicious mining apparatus, such as picks and drills and lasers, which could be used for kills and maimeses. They beheld it all with joyous tears. Clarence grabbed a pointy rake, Lulu did a pickaxe take, and for the laser both did make, shouting, "This way, zombie saw!" The monster looked up from its goring, just red goo now, getting boring, and once again it started soaring, rushing toward the lovers, soaring on its nasty wings and scoring rents on bare rock and Gilstore. The red-hot laser stood upright, invisible to zombie sight, and as the dinosaur in flight hissed forth towards the lovers too, it didn't see it down it swept, its trajectory intercepted, by the cutting tool dissected, one half from the other hewed. Lulu hissed and Clarence cheered, but their mirth was short-endeared, for even as they dropped their mining gear, they saw both zombie halves uprear. Zombie dinosaurs appeared, could not be killed by being cut in half. And now 2 halves of sentient flesh, with sentient bones and veins enmeshed, all rotten and all far from flesh, gave out a hollow, evil laugh. The front half, like a coiled spring or Nikola Tesla, sprang ka-ching into our lovers' midst. Lulu went to meet the head, like someone from the living dead, but Lulu had been misled, for round the back the arse had fled, and now her back was turned with dread. She heard the bit she'd missed. Clarence cried out just in time. Lulu ducked as taily slime swiped directly for her spine. "Clever girl," she hissed. Jurassic Park reference, everyone. All the dinosaurs. But now, forewarned, Lulu scorned the zombie's subterfuge. She dodged the tail, and with primal wail, for the monster's eyes started to gouge. The head was in bits, and that was that. But the tail was still thrashing about. It was sharp as a needle. It ran through Don Cheadle, and also an innocent passing trout. Take me, monster! Lulu cried. Lulu? Who the fuck's that? Take me, monster! Lulu cried. Lulu's a fashion icon from the 60s. It's not her. Take me, monster! Lulu cried. But leave poor Clarence. He's the best. And now that you don't have a mouth anymore, I don't like to think how you'd ingest her. Nonsense, beast! Cried Clarence True in a final desperate bid. Lulu is true, she's nicer than you, and to see her reduced to a bubbly goo is a thing that ought never be did. It seemed their love had charmed the beast, or confused him in the least, for he stopped and looked confused, and in that moment both recalled the book that they'd first used. As quick as a stick on top of a brick, a clickety-clickety-clickety-click, they whipped it from their bag. And finding the page from which they read the cantation backwards instead, and the tail collapsed all shiny and red, and lay lifeless on the ground. Lulu took Clarence's hand. They climbed out of the mine, and then, did they ever go back to the old ghost mine? No, they never went back to the old ghost mine. No. They never went back again. And so concludes the poem, everyone, and alas, with it tonight's show. But before we depart, I hope I didn't frighten anyone to explosion. That would be terrible. A few quick things. Happy birthday to my Uncle Big Michael, who's watching. He's 65 today, everybody. Give him a cheer. Hooray! Marvelous. Thanks for watching, Big Michael. You're excellent. And thank you very much for having me, the Jam Society. It's always the best fun. They do other videos, everyone. They're doing lots during this quarantine. Look at all their videos. They're excellent. They're superb musicians, and they get lovely, excellent people on their shows to collaborate with them, and they're lovely, excellent people, and generally you should just watch. What else do I need to say? Oh, yes, of course, the important, stay safe, everyone. Stay well and stay at home, unless you're watching this in the distant future, in which case follow whichever medical directions you're given in your time period. Good night, everyone. Stay spooky. Will out.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up one more time for Mr. Will Seaward. Mr. Will Seaward with spooky ghost stories. Wasn't that fantastic? I know I'm spooked, and I have heard these stories before. This was very spooky indeed. Thank you so much, Will, for joining us once more. If you have enjoyed this show and you happen to have some spare income, you can throw it at Will. You will appreciate it. Just like many artists, he has no gigs right now. So you could... Oh, someone just did, in fact, start the donation. Thank you so much. If you would like to donate to Will, you can go to jamvarietyshow.com/online, scroll all the way to the bottom. There's a button at the bottom saying donate, and you can donate right there through PayPal or via cards. Anyway, for those of you who joined us and those of you who are watching us in the future, not live currently, thank you so much for watching this show. Indeed, we are going to do more shows. In fact, tomorrow we have an improvised call-in show, a very, very different format, starting 1 hour later, so that would be 9 o'clock in UK time, and you figure out whatever time that means for you. Meanwhile, we have been Jam with Humans, and once again, this has been the spooky ghost stories by Mr. Will Seaward. Good night, everyone.